Hello and welcome to WorkFast TV, where we learn how the internet is changing how we work together. Before we start, we'd like to thank our sponsor, SAP, a world leader in business networks. Thanks for the mugs, by the way, for companies of all sizes. Thanks, SAP, for sponsoring the show and having great guests on like Tim Ferriss. We have an exciting guest, the most hated man in productivity. And that's Tim Ferriss, author of the best-selling 4-Hour Workweek. Tell me about the guest.
I just finished rereading Timothy Ferriss's book, and it's really pretty damn good. It was #1 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list. If you look on Amazon, it's number 54 today. Yeah. He's been reviewed by...
Our book never, it hit that for maybe 20 minutes, right?
No, our book, the best our book ever did was 689, and that was after I ordered 12 of them to get it up there, you know, down there. You know, but Tim's been reviewed everywhere. Business Week, Fortune, Forbes, everywhere. He's even on the Fast Company 100 Innovators of 2007 list. But it's more than that, because the guy only works 4 hours a week. You know, this is 1 hour. So
that's why we all hate him, because he gets to go really crazy places like Brazil and learn how to tango. And
yeah, he's the world record holder in tango twirls, which he did. What TV program was that?
Regis and Kelly, Live with Regis and Kelly.
I've heard of them. They're ranked a little higher than us, just like your book sells a little better than ours. You know, now I know why he's so hated. You know, he's also through some dispute. Holds a title in World Kickboxing Championship. We'll let him explain the dispute later.
I'm not asking the really hard questions
the
today.
national. I'll let Shell ask you about the national.
He might go, whoop.
They got more distance.
You'll note that you're sitting next to him, and I have a table for protection. He's a lecturer on entrepreneurship at Princeton. He skis in the Andes. He just did a road trip with his brother, so he really does have this theory that you work as little as you can. His company, Brain Quicken, produces, according to his book, $40K a month, and he works 4 hours a week. So, Tim, welcome to WorkFast.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and you know, I'm wondering. Oh, it's a short week, so that leaves you 3 hours to do other stuff. So, okay. But I read your book again very recently, and the first thing is you started like most of the people watching this show. You were a hopeless workaholic. You were embedded in email and customer support and all this stuff. What made you suddenly stop and get immersed into what evolved to be the 4-Hour Workweek?
Well, I think that there was one particular turning point that I don't talk about all too much in the book, but in early 2004, I was working from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. across multiple time zones. So I'd wake up, I'd do East Coast and the UK, then I'd do Pacific, then I'd later do Japan and Australasia. And a long-term girlfriend at the time actually broke up with me because of that schedule. She never saw me. And the parting gift that she gave me, her version of a Dear John letter, wasn't so much a plaque as one of these photo holders that you can see at Target. Folds out, it's made out of metal. And it said, work hours end at 5 p.m. And she said, I want you to have this as a memento. And that really, I think, brought into focus one of the core assumptions and premises of how I live in the book, which is that income has no practical value, lifestyle output value, without time. And that was what really catalyzed looking at the business and redesigning it or shutting it down, depending on if it was compatible or could be compatible with some type of lifestyle. And it was at that point that I decided to take 4 weeks in London, because I think it is very helpful to change environments, to remove yourself from a certain set of habits and a certain schedule. To deconstruct this business and remove all the unnecessary pieces and automate as much as possible. That 4 weeks led me to test one major issue that I had been facing, which was email. So email, as I'm sure most people are aware, has turned into more of a problem in many cases. than help. And so I'd been checking email 100 plus times a day, like a rat with the cocaine pellet dispenser, hitting send receive, and
I'm doing that with friend feed right now.
yeah. But I set this one rule, which was in order to avoid that reactive type of behavior, that I would check email once per week for no more than 2 hours per week. And that was the rule. So I had to do that on Mondays and Mondays alone. And I had to design everything else, whether that's using autoresponders or outsourcing, filtering the email, to accommodate that. And that worked for those 4 weeks. So I simply stayed out of the US, and it turned into 18 months that took me from anywhere from Berlin to Panama to later on in Argentina, and had no intention of writing the book, but that's how all of this came about.
How much of what you do relies on the internet? Because that's what this show's about,
Sure.
is how the internet's changing how we work together.
I would say almost all of it depends on.
Give me some sense.
So I'll give you some.
Because your book is two pieces, right? One is it's a little bombastic to get
Right.
you to wake up and look at your life and
Right.
are you doing the right thing? And then the other part of it is helpful tips for here, if you hate your job and you hate your life, here's how to
Right.
restructure your life. And tell me a little bit about some of the things you do.
Yeah, sure. So I think that there are two components, like you said. One is the core set of sort of tenets or philosophies, like practical philosophies, sort of operating system rules, upon which you can then apply technology. So for example, if you look at, let's say, Thoreau, who said, man is rich in proportion to the number of things he can leave alone. Well, that's great, but without certain tools like Skype or email, if used properly, Elance, and I'll give a few concrete examples, it's very hard to implement that unless you choose to do what he did, which is go out to a lake and essentially avoid humanity, which isn't practical for most people who have mortgages to pay. And
He also had
massive
no
fee-
connection.
Right, exactly. And unbeknownst to most people, he actually spent, he begged his friend Emerson to spend time with him and to provide him with free meals and entertainment at his house. So he escaped the lake quite a bit. I think now what we have, whether that's, let's say, using Google Docs to establish a set of rules that a virtual assistant can follow to parse your email for you, after which, let's just say, as in my case, I have one in Vancouver, and she's actually on an island off of Vancouver, which wouldn't have even had telephone not long ago. She now uses, whether it's Skype to communicate with me or email, to essentially provide me with about 10 minutes of action items per day. If I were to do that filtering myself, there's a point when the book was at its peak, 2 months after the publication, where I was getting 300 email an hour. I kid you not. I had to change my strategy a bit, but she's able to reduce that down to 10 to 20 minutes. And she depends on Skype. She depends on certainly Gmail. I don't have to use any type of enterprise level software or server-based program, at least that I have to manage. And it's essentially all free. So I think that both the cost limitations of designing a lifestyle and the practical technological limitations have really all been eliminated for the most part. And there's I think one mistaken assumption that many people make about the book, which is that it depends on new technology that we have access to. And I think what it actually depends on is the dissemination of those tools to other places. So if I have Skype, that's one thing. But if millions of people in India then have Skype, well, then that opens up a whole new sort of Pandora's box of possibilities. But I would say the practical application of a lot of these philosophies that allows you to reduce your workload while not sacrificing income depends entirely on the internet.
Yeah. What you're saying is so incredible, right? The kind of lifestyle shift and work shift that a lot of people on the chat room right now are calling you a hoax or calling you, saying that this guy's a scam, a sham.
Sure.
What are some of the real ways that somebody can work from, because I used to work at NEC, 115,000 employee place. You had to go to work at 9, you had to wear a suit, which is why I wear one on this show, because it reminds me that this is about work, right?
Yeah.
How do you move from that world into the world where you're working very little and getting very high value for the work you put in and outsourcing everything else?
So I think the second piece that you brought up is very important, getting very high value for the work you put in. So ever since the book came out, there's been this gallery of people who call me a hoax or whatever that might be, And I think the main point that many of them are missing, because they haven't actually taken the time to look at the book or to read the blog, is that the book is not literally about everyone working 4 hours a week. It's about decreasing the number of inputs and increasing the number of, or the quality and quantity of output, right? All that means is that as a true entrepreneur, in the sense that J.B. Say originally coined the term, you're taking resources from an area of low economic value and shifting them to an area of high economic value. So what are the practical examples? The first caveat is that it does not need to include outsourcing. So the two things that I get the most media play from are checking email, let's say twice a day, and then personal outsourcing. You could completely ignore both of those things, and still, those are 2 of 16 chapters, and it wouldn't in any way invalidate the premise of the book in any way. So some practical tools.
Wait, just reiterate then what the premise of the book is, so
So
that
the
people
premise
get
of
that
the book,
straight.
the premise of the book, I would say there are 2 premises. The first is that the objective is not busyness. So massive action without clearly defined objectives is a form of laziness, right? And secondly, that the deferred life plan, so to speak, that is a retirement-based life plan, long-haul career planning, after which you redeem all of the experiences you want to have, the possessions you want to own, is fundamentally flawed. And I don't think, it's very difficult for people to argue with the logic. It's easy to attack me. Okay, he's 30 years old, doesn't have any kids, what does this guy know?
We're accused of being too nice to our guests, so Robert and I have decided we are going to attack you.
Yeah, attack me.
But then we read about the kickboxing stuff. And I thought that around.
Right, so
So we let the chat room do our dirty
yeah, you let the chat do it. And that's fine. I mean, if people want to attack me, if we all had the same opinion, the world would be a very boring place. But let's just take personal outsourcing as an example. I can't do it, I have a boss, I'd get fired. Okay. First of all, I don't distinguish between work or business and personal time, in so much as if you're misspending that time, whether it's on household chores on the weekend when you've put in 80 hours from Monday to Friday, or checking email to simulate forward motion as opposed to defining your measurable objectives, those are both wastes of time. So if you have a job and there's absolutely no way you can apply outsourcing that job, which we can question in a second, that still means, let's say your son has a birthday party on Sunday, he wants the equivalent of this season's Tickle Me Elmo, which is impossible to find, rather than spending your entire Saturday going from store to store over, let's say, a period of 5 hours to find the toy, you could call or email Ask Sunday, go to asksunday.com, and for $40 to $50 a month, have 30 inquiries. This would be one. You call them, you say, here's my zip code, call every toy store within a 10-mile radius, find this toy, make a reservation or purchase it using my credit card, and have it held behind the counter. Call me when it's ready, tell me where to pick it up. And that would save you 4 to 5 hours, right? So let's just say that you make $50,000 a year. There are a number of ways you can go about it, but an easy way to approximate your per hour income is if you work 40 hours a week and get 2 weeks of vacation a year, is to cut off the last 3 zeros and chop that remaining number in half. So that would mean that if you make $50,000 a year, you make roughly $25 an hour. Okay, so if you can, for $40, get, let's say, 30 inquiries, this one inquiry alone on a weekend saves you 4 to 5 hours. Well, let's say $100 to $125 profit in time currency that you've gained. And the goal is not, again, to get from 80 to 4 hours. I don't believe and never claim that someone can do that overnight. And most people, if they enjoy their work, would never want to get to 4 hours. So the objective is to spend time on the things that are most profitable or most enjoyable. And for some people, let's say those are pastors, writers, teachers, it's not being inactive. That's never the objective. I work my ass off on things that I care about. I'm a very, very busy guy, as you know, but on things that I choose to spend my time on. Those people, let's say a pastor who suffers from, let's say, emotional fatigue, sympathy fatigue, his objective will simply be to reduce the volume of work so that he can be most effective. And whether it's using Ask Sunday or simply training yourself to check email at set times so that it doesn't become a reactive disorganized approach.
It's, to me, the book is divided into two things. One is a philosophical thing saying, don't get lost in the details and quagmire of life because you're going to end up dead that way.
Right.
And nobody ever has raised their head from a deathbed and said, I should have spent more hours in the office. And you're saying use modern tools, the tools of the internet, to be more productive so you can choose to do more things. In my life, what has happened is the tools keep getting better, keep getting better, keep getting better, and we get more productive. But very few people actually work less.
Sure. Yep.
And
we
very
get caught up in the
Yeah.
tool. Like, I'm seeing this with email, right? This show is about getting you out of email through techniques like you're talking about, but also get your, if you're working on a project, get that out of email and put it into a collaborative spreadsheet or a collaborative, tool like Concept Share or Slide Rocket, right?
Yeah.
Because that way we can work together without sending each other email. And just doing that reduces the amount of email load we have, right?
Well, absolutely. So I think there are a few things. First is that technology is an excellent slave and a terrible master. So you want to control and manage technology, not the other way around. And I think if people sit down and examine their workflow, if they were to use, let's say, a program like Rescue Time to log the amount of time that they spend on open windows in a browser, the amount of time they spend on applications, and let's just say...
For those of us who are not geeks, tell me a little bit more about Rescue Time.
So Rescue Time is a program, it's a free program. If you go to rescuetime.com, you can download it, and it will give you a fairly accurate snapshot of how you're spending your time. For most knowledge workers who spend that time on a computer, you'll be able to see how much time you spend on certain sites, how much time you spend on applications that are installed locally. So both of those, which is very important to see that comparison. So if you were to look at, let's say, the ratio of browsing to application use, whether that's web-based or on the local computer, you could get a pretty good understanding of your productivity. And productivity being defined as ratio of input to output.
Yeah.
All this means is the first step is being aware of how you're spending your time, just like you would do, let's say, calorie counting or portion counting on a diet. And once you do that, you can identify, let's say, the 20% of activities that are consuming 80% of your time. It's always very disproportionate. And the other issue, which I think is very insufficiently addressed in most time management books per se, which is why I don't like to label this as a time management book, is that if you decrease workload, it creates a void. And for people who are in any respect driven or ambitious, if they have to choose between being bored or feeling productive, even if they're not being productive, they will always opt to feel productive. Therefore, if you wake up late on a Saturday after putting in 80 hours, you haven't planned the weekend, you say, I'm going to check email for 10 minutes, that's how you end up spending 3-4 hours checking email on a Saturday. And then you spend Sunday preoccupied about Monday. And this also brings back, or brings into focus, a problem with many of the tools that are interruptive by nature is that it's not just a question of time. So if time determines the value of income, let's just say you scan your inbox for 5 minutes on a Saturday morning. You have the time to do that, but what if you find a crisis or a problem, chances are you will, whether it's manufactured by someone else or real, that you can't address until Monday morning. Now you're preoccupied for the next 48 hours, and you end up not in a state of relaxation, not in a state of productivity, but at a middle point where you get neither.
This is interesting because we're going to have David Allen on in a couple of weeks, and he talks a lot about that issue, about the thoughts in your mind and how to get those out of your mind so that you can enjoy your time off, or you can think creatively about the problems in front of you.
Sure.
And he has a lot of tools to help people do that, which are quite different than your book. Your book is about forcing you to look at your life differently,
It is different, and I think that and Gina Trapani of Lifehackers said this, and I admire her a lot.
We want to get her on the show, so Gina, if you're listening, we want you on the show.
Yeah, so Gina is a real forerunner in identifying the tools, whether that's, let's say, MeTimer as a plugin for Firefox, which will allow you to log your browser use, but not application use. That's why I tend to lean towards Rescue Timer. MeTimer would be one example. She's very good at examining those tools and identifying them, but she has said that personal productivity is personal, right?
Yeah.
And there are two, what many people view as competing approaches. What you might call a top-down approach, which would be 7 Habits, or some people might say the 4-Hour Workweek is a top-down approach. So you identify priorities, principles, and then you move down to process. David Allen is very, very good at a bottom-up approach.
Yeah.
And he'll be the first one to label it as such, which is sort of tactical, process-driven, and then later principle-driven.
Yeah.
I find that those can be complementary if you sequence them in the right fashion. I just find that it's more important to eliminate in a culture and in an environment where there's always more information than attention. It's not possible, it's not scalable to organize and absorb all of that information. You have to apply filters. So if you don't eliminate first and you get very good at the processes, what happens is you become extremely efficient but not effective. So let me take a step back. So being efficient is getting very good at a certain task, whether or not it is important.
Yeah.
Becoming effective is doing what is important. And I think that, especially in the technology world, people are apt to become very process-driven. And if a task taking a lot of time or having invested a lot of time does not make a task important. So I think that having that distinction is very, very critical.
One of the guests just
Yeah,
said, I guess he's going to tell me that I should stop watching the stream and I should stick to my plan to work on my thesis. This is actually
Right.
why this show exists.
Yeah.
This show is how I manage my attention. We started talking about show and I said, I need to do a live show
Yeah.
so that I have an hour out of my day
Yeah.
and it's over with,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Right.
also, one of my life goals is to have an interesting conversation every day, right?
Sure.
That's how I manage my attention, and if I do that and pay myself with that conversation, then I feel like I got something really important done.
Right.
If I get stuck on friend feed and I don't have that, you know,
Right.
really in-deep conversation, I'm going to feel like I didn't get something done.
Yeah, exactly.
We're running out of time already.
let-
I had one
Just,
last
can I just
question.
make one
Yeah,
real quick
sure.
distinction? There are different currencies. Income or money is the most commonly discussed, but you also have time and attention. Those currencies can all be spent or invested, all right? So when you invest time, you can get a compounded return on that investment. So what I mean by that is some people say, oh, well, I shouldn't read the book or I shouldn't be listening to this feed because I should be saving the time that I'm now spending. Well, if you invest it properly so that you're actually developing tools that will later save you proportionally a multiple of the time you're spending, that's an investment. So that would be my response.
Okay. A quick answer, because we want to get to the questions
Yep.
coming there. You blogged recently about a margin manifesto for startups, where basically you're saying that they get sidetracked and they need to get to profit as quickly and easily as possible. Can you talk about that for a couple of minutes?
Sure. So one of my commenters actually, I think, said it best, and this was a quote from a very successful technology firm. He said, "You can be patient for revenue, but impatient for profit." I think that much like Peter,
Was he a VC?
no, I think VCs are pretty impatient for both, but
Yeah.
in most cases. But the Peter Drucker, the management theorist, said that what gets measured gets managed. But in the technology world, especially among startups, I think that there is an epidemic of measuring for the sake of measuring. So I think more accurately, I went to the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholders meeting recently. I had a chance to ask Warren Buffett a few questions, which was fantastic.
And you posted about how you manipulated, not for a seat, but for a microphone.
For a
which is
microphone,
pretty clever.
right?
Yeah.
And the point that he makes is you don't want to measure for the sake of measuring. You want to measure what matters. And I think that it's very easy to get sidetracked from, let's say, the 6 metrics that really matter. For many startups operating in an online environment, that'll be tracking very carefully your cost per acquisition and then lifetime value of each customer. There are a number of financial applications of the 80-20 principle. So recognizing that the objective is not more employees, the objective is not more customers necessarily, it's more profit. So that if you can take and identify, let's just say, the 20% of customers that are producing 80% of that profit, you can profile them, stop spending 80% of your time on the high maintenance demographic, and then multiply that much more effectively than if you're simply trying to tread water with customer service. There are different philosophies related to dealing with customers, whether that's 37 signals and Apple approach, or the satisfaction approach. But those would be a few of the keys. I just think it's very important to choose your metrics and stick with them, because even on a balance sheet or an income statement, there are really a few numbers that are most important.
We're getting a ton of questions, so we're
we're
going to stick
running
around
low on
after the
time.
show, right? So
Yeah.
we'll get to a lot of the questions afterwards, because we only have 2 minutes
Yeah,
left.
this
problem.
flew by.
Yeah, did go quickly.
Somebody was asking, what do you do for a living? I have a sense that you're making a lot of money off the book and off of speaking and stuff like that, but did you start out to do that as a living?
Oh God, not at all. I mean, the people. So one thing that I hear quite a bit from anonymous postings and so forth is, well, easy for you to say you have a best-selling book, right? As you guys, I'm sure, can attest, choosing publishing as your vehicle for getting rich is just about the worst thing you could possibly do. Sit down with an editor, have them explain the economics of book publishing. But
Or we will.
yeah, or these guys can. But what I do for a living
Don't get me started.
is I teach and I invest. So I enjoy teaching. The blog has turned into a great medium for that. And experimenting. So I would say at heart I'm an experimentalist. Then I share those findings, and I also now invest in technology companies as an angel here in the Valley mostly. But I view myself as an
You
experimentalist.
just opened a big door. I didn't know that, and there's very little time, but what kind of companies do you invest in, and how big?
Very small companies. I mean, I would say that I'm very fond of the investment approaches of, let's say, Mike Maples Jr. and Peter Thiel, so sort of micro cap, where you have a handful of people that, with more than a concept, they have an online-based, let's say, service that is already reaching some traction. That's the type of company that I'm interested in, primarily in the Bay Area, San Francisco area.
Great.
Well, cool. Wow, I could spend hours. Can we spend 4 hours talking with you?
Yeah,
sometime?
for sure, man. For sure.
But thanks so
great.
much for
This is
giving us a
really
look at
great.
your 4-hour work
Yeah,
week.
this is terrific.
You've given us almost an hour, of, which is what, 1/4 of your
I
time?
know, I
It's
know.
gonna
What are you
be
going to
great.
do with it? Do you count this as work now?
This isn't financially motivated. And we could spend another hour talking about work, but I mean, this is fun for me. I don't have to continue pushing the book, but I like hanging out with you guys. So here we are.
So real quickly, Shell, who do we have next week?
Next week is Matt Russell, who is the founder and CEO of a Web 2.0 company up in Idaho, or is it Iowa? One of the two, Idaho. And he's gone around, he's been interviewing CEOs of companies of all sizes about what makes them productive. And it's a different view than David Allen's, a different view than you have. I think it'll be really nice in the sequence of what we're doing.
Excellent.
So,
Don't go away. We're having a live chat right afterwards at kite.tv/Scobalizer. And thank you so much for joining us. And
2, 3.
now get back to work. Only do 4 hours of it.
3 hours.